They told us to play the perfect power couple, but elegance won't save us. We're the ghosts of who used to be. They said prove your loyalty. To kill was my only choice.
The perpetual Icelandic twilight bled through the single high window of the Reykjavik bolt hole, casting long, cold shadows across the cluttered workspace. Alexei Lex Volkov hunched over a humming server rack, fingers flying across a keyboard, the glow of multiple monitors etching lines of fatigue onto his face. The air smelled of ozone, stale coffee, and the faint metallic tang of fear he could never quite shake. 3 years. 3 years of silence, of paranoia so deep it felt like marrow in his bones. 3 years since the world knew Prometheus, the legendary ethical hacker, as a traitor who'd unleashed chaos. Only ghosts lived here now. Him and the ghosts of his past. A soft, almost imperceptible chime echoed from a secondary terminal tucked away in a Faraday cage. Not an alarm. A specific sequence. A fragment of melody he'd composed years ago, embedded in a piece of code only one other person knew. A requiem for a dead trust. Morgan. Ice flooded Lex's veins, colder than the glacial wind scraping the building outside. His hand hovered over a hidden kill switch that would plunge the room into darkness and fry every circuit. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic prisoner. Trap. It has to be a trap. Yet, the melody persisted. A digital siren song dredging up memories of tangled sheets, shared dreams, and the shattering sting of her betrayal. The agent who'd sold him out to save her precious sources, leaving him branded and broken. He didn't hear the door open. He felt it. A shift in the air pressure, the faintest scrape of booted soles on concrete. He spun. A compact taser already palmed, his back pressed against the humming server rack. She stood framed in the doorway, a silhouette against the dim corridor light. Tall, poised, radiating a lethal calm that hadn't been there before. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, emphasizing the sharp angles of her face. The years hadn't softened Morgan Shaw. They'd honed her. The tailored black coat spoke of authority, of budgets Lex's off-grid existence couldn't fathom. Her eyes, the color of storm-tossed slate, locked onto his. They held no surprise, only a weary recognition and something else. Urgency? Guilt? "Hello, Lex," she said, her voice low, controlled, yet it resonated in the small space like a gunshot. Rage, hot and immediate, surged through him, momentarily eclipsing the fear. "Get out!" The words were gravel. "Before I make you." She didn't flinch. "We don't have time for that. They're closing in. Different players this time. Faster, meaner." She took a cautious step inside, scanning the room with a professional's swift assessment. "You triggered my beacon. You knew it was me." "A ghost calling a ghost," Lex spat, the taser aimed squarely at her center mass. "Why? Come to finish the job Minerva started? Tie up loose ends?" A flicker of pain crossed her features. "It wasn't like that, Lex. You know it wasn't. I had a gun to my head, a metaphorical one aimed at a dozen deep-cover assets. Sacrificing you saved lives." "Saved your career, you mean?" The accusation tore from him. "You let them paint me as a monster. I spent years trying to stop the Pandora breach, not cause it. And you handed me the knife they used to gut my life." Morgan closed her eyes for a fraction of a second. "I carry that, Lex. Every damn day. But this isn't about the past. It's about preventing something infinitely worse. Something that makes Pandora look like a kid smashing a toy." Lex's grip tightened on the taser. Her intensity was unnerving. Worse how? The Ghost Network. The name dropped into the room like a stone into a still pool. A Darknet platform moderated by an AI so sophisticated, it's practically sentient. Think eBay for the apocalypse. They've auctioned dormant CIA assets in Beijing, stolen vaccine formulas, a nerve agent prototype last week. She took another step closer, her gaze boring into his. Tonight, in less than 72 hours, they go live with their crown jewel. The Genesis Key. Lex scoffed, though a cold dread was seeping past the anger. Sounds like spy thriller nonsense. What's a Genesis Key? A digital skeleton key, Morgan stated flatly. Weapons. Grade algorithmic warfare. Slip it into the core banking protocols of the G20 nations, and you don't just crash the system, you rewrite it. Control currencies, erase debts, create hyperinflation at will. Whoever wins that auction buys global financial dominance. Or collapse, whichever they prefer. The sheer, terrifying scale of it momentarily stole Lex's breath. It was worse. Much worse. He saw the truth of it in the grim set of Morgan's jaw, the haunted look beneath her professional veneer. The Ghost Network wasn't just criminal. It was geopolitical arson on an unprecedented scale. Why tell me? Lex lowered the taser slightly, suspicion warring with a horrifying fascination. You burned me once. Why drag me back into the fire? Morgan met his gaze unflinchingly. Because you're the only one who might be able to crack its core architecture. We've tried. Our best minds hit digital walls that rebuild faster than we can break them. It's alien. Lex felt the old pull, the seductive challenge of the uncrackable code warring violently with his ingrained survival instinct. No, I'm done playing hero for people who spit on me. Find another ghost. He turned back towards his screens, a clear dismissal. What if I told you? Morgan's voice cut through his retreat, sharper now. That buried deep within the Ghost Network's architecture, possibly within the Genesis key protocols themselves, is a data packet? A packet containing the original unaltered logs from the Pandora breach? Logs that prove your intrusion was purely defensive? Logs that pinpoint exactly who framed you, who stole your work, and planted the evidence that made you the world's most wanted hacker? Lex froze. The hum of the servers seemed to grow deafening. 3 years of running, hiding, the gnawing injustice, the desperate need to clear his name, it all coalesced into a single, agonizing point of hope. A poisoned chalice offered by the hand that had poisoned him before. He slowly turned back. The raw vulnerability in his eyes mirrored the storm in hers. You're lying. I wish I were, Morgan whispered. But it's there. Our deep scans detected its signature. Encrypted, hidden, but unmistakably yours. Someone wanted a trophy, or insurance. She stepped forward, closing the final distance. The air crackled, thick with unresolved history and the terrifying gravity of her offer. This is your shot, Lex. Not just to stop a global catastrophe, but to reclaim your life. To force the world to see Prometheus wasn't a monster. He searched her face, looking for the lie, the trap. He saw only fierce conviction and a deep, unsettling fear. Fear of the Ghost Network, fear of failure, and perhaps fear of him. The old chemistry sparked, dangerous and unwelcome, a phantom limb of their past connection. Even if I believed you, Lex rasped, his voice tight. Even if I wanted to, getting close to something like that, it's suicide. Especially for me. A ghost of her old determined smile touched Morgan's lips. That's where your family comes in. She pulled a sleek, encrypted tablet from her coat, activating it. A dossier flashed up. Shipping manifests, surveillance photos, financial networks spidering across the globe. At the center, a face both familiar and chillingly altered by time and power. Nikolai Volkov, Lex's estranged uncle. Nikolai, Lex breathed, a cold knot forming in his stomach. He's involved? He's a founding patron, Morgan confirmed. His legitimate shipping empire provides the perfect cover for the network's physical logistics. He controls access to the inner circle. To get an invite to the Founders Gala in Monaco, the only time high-level users meet offline, we need his sponsorship. Lex stared at his uncle's image. The shrewd eyes, the smile that didn't reach them. He threw my father out like garbage. He'd never vouch for me. Not for Lex Volkov, the disgraced hacker, Morgan agreed, tapping the tablet. The image shifted to a pair of sleek, dangerous-looking individuals. A man with sharp, angular features and cold eyes. A woman radiating icy ambition. But he might, for Sasha and Mila Ivanov. Ruthless data brokers from the shadows. Specialists in high-stakes corporate espionage and blackmail. New players hungry for a seat at the big table. Lex understood. The Masquerade. The ultimate hack wasn't just of systems, but of identity. To infiltrate the lion's den, they had to become predators themselves. We? Lex echoed, the implication settling like lead. This isn't a solo run, Lex, Morgan said, her voice firm. Nikolai expects a power couple. Partners. Sasha needs Mila's social lethality as much as Mila needs Sasha's technical genius. Her gaze held his, the unspoken history, a live wire between them. We need to be convincing, in every way. The weight of it crashed down. The impossible mission, the bait of redemption, the shadow of his treacherous uncle, and the terrifying intimacy of pretending to be lovers with the woman who'd shattered him. The Ghost Network loomed, a digital abyss. Nikolai's estate promised a more immediate, human danger. Lex looked from Morgan's resolute face to the image of his uncle. The disgraced ghost saw no good choices. only paths paved with varying degrees of risk and regret. But the lure of the truth, the chance to tear down the monument built on his ruin, was a siren song too powerful to ignore. He took a slow, deep breath, the air tasting of dust and impending doom. "Fine," he said, the word tasting like ash. "Let's go meet Uncle Nikolai." The sleek, unmarked jet descended through the bruised twilight over the Ligurian Sea. Below, the lights of Monaco glittered like scattered diamonds on black velvet, a playground for the obscenely wealthy. Inside the plush cabin, the air hummed with tension thicker than the engines.
Lex, now Sasha Ivanov, stared out the window. The transformation was startling. Gone was the hoodie and worn jeans, replaced by a charcoal Brioni suit that fit like armor. His dark hair was ruthlessly styled, a subtle scar artfully accentuated near his temple with makeup. Contact lenses turned his expressive eyes a flinty gray. He looked every inch the cold, calculating data mercenary Morgan's Minerva artisans had crafted. But inside, Lex Volkov churned, a storm of resentment, fear, and the gnawing ache for the truth Morgan had dangled. Opposite him, Mila Ivanov reviewed files on a tablet. Morgan Shaw had vanished, submerged beneath a persona of glacial sophistication. Her dark hair was swept into an elegant chignon, her sharp features accentuated by minimal, flawless makeup. A sheath dress, the color of diamond, clung to her form, exuding an aura of controlled power and predatory grace. Only the slight tension in her jaw betrayed the agent beneath the Ice Queen. "Remember," Morgan murmured, her voice low and devoid of its usual warmth, adopting Mila's clipped, faintly Eastern European cadence. "Nikolai Volkov respects strength and despises weakness. He'll test us. Primarily you, Sasha. He'll want proof of your unique talents." Lex kept his gaze fixed on the approaching coastline. "He gets a demonstration. He owns me. Or tries to." "He gets a controlled demonstration," Morgan corrected. "Something impressive enough to earn his sponsorship, but nothing that reveals your full capabilities or gives him leverage. We need him intrigued, not threatened, or possessive." The plane touched down with a gentle bump, taxied to a secluded hangar far from the commercial terminals. As they disembarked, the warm, salt-tinged air of the Riviera felt alien after Reykjavik's bite. A black Maybach waited, engine purring. A stone-faced driver opened the door. The drive wound up into the hills, away from the garish casino lights, towards an enclave of staggering wealth and discretion. Nikolai Volkov's villa wasn't just a home, it was a fortress, disguised as paradise. High walls topped with subtle sensors, manicured gardens concealing motion trackers, panoramic windows offering views that were doubtless monitored from within. The car glided through imposing wrought iron gates and stopped before a sprawling, modern masterpiece of glass and steel. As Lex and Morgan stepped out, the heavy front door swung open. Nikolai Volkov stood framed in the light. Time had been kind, adding only distinguished silver at his temples to the thick, dark hair. He wore a cream linen suit, open-necked shirt, exuding relaxed power. His eyes, the same sharp, calculating gray as Lex's natural ones, but colder, swept over them with unnerving intensity. A slow, predatory smile spread across his face, revealing perfect, expensive teeth. "Sasha, Mila." His voice was smooth as aged cognac, rich with an accent that blended old-world Russia with global elite. He spread his hands in welcome. "Welcome to my humble refuge. I've been eager to meet the elusive Ivanovs. Come in, let us become acquainted." The warmth in his voice didn't reach his eyes. The lion was ready to play. Nikolai Volkov's villa wasn't just opulent, it was a carefully curated stage for power. Soaring ceilings met walls of reinforced glass offering dizzying panoramas of the Mediterranean, currently swallowing the last embers of the sunset. The air hummed with a discreet thrum of climate control and hidden security systems, smelling faintly of lemon polish, expensive cigars, and something sharper, colder, ambition. Contemporary art pieces worth more than Lex's entire Reykjavik setup looked like casual afterthoughts. Nikolai led them through the cavernous space with the ease of a practiced host, his charm as smooth as the polished concrete floor. Yet Lex felt the man's gaze like a physical weight, constantly assessing, probing. He was scanning for cracks in Sasha Ivanov's armor. "Your reputation precedes you, Sasha," Nikolai purred, gesturing towards a seating area dominated by low-slung designer furniture. A crystal decanter and glasses sat waiting. Data brokers who operate at your level. They are rare birds. Usually, they prefer the shadows, not the sunlight. He poured 3 fingers of an amber liquid, offering a glass to Lex, then Morgan. What brings the elusive Ivanovs out into the open? And to my doorstep? Morgan, as Mila, accepted the glass with a cool, appreciative nod. Her posture was regal, her smile a calculated curve devoid of warmth. Opportunity, Nikolai, she stated, her accent flawless, hinting at a childhood split between Moscow and Geneva. The shadows grow crowded. The real power, the truly lucrative opportunities, require access, influence. She took a small sip, her eyes never leaving his. We understand you control a certain gateway, the Ghost Network. Nikolai's smile didn't falter, but a flicker of calculation sharpened his gaze. He turned his attention fully to Lex. The network is selective, Mila. Exceedingly so. It demands proof of worth. Not just financial, he waved a dismissive hand, but capability, discretion, resilience. He leaned back, swirling his drink. Tell me, Sasha, what makes you think you possess the particular skill set the Ghost Network values? Lex felt the trap being laid. Nikolai wasn't asking about generic hacking. He wanted specifics, a demonstration tailored to his own security. He met his uncle's gaze, channeling Sasha's cold arrogance, burying the roiling mess of Lex Volkov beneath. Value is subjective, Nikolai, he replied, his own voice lower, rougher than usual, adopting a slight Slavic inflection Morgan's team had drilled into him. Some value brute force. Crude. Predictable. Others. He paused, letting the implication hang. Value elegance. The ability to slip through defenses unseen, to extract the impossible without leaving a trace. To make systems confess their secrets. He took a deliberate sip of the cognac, letting the silence stretch. I specialize in the latter, especially hardened systems belonging to those who believe themselves untouchable. A spark of genuine interest, predatory and sharp, ignited in Nikolai's eyes. He chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. Bold words, Sasha. Very bold. Elegance, you say? He set his glass down and steepled his fingers. Let us test this elegance. My private network. He gestured vaguely towards the ceiling. A hobby project. Nothing critical, of course, but reasonably fortified. Penetrate it. Find a specific file. A photograph, actually. My late father's favorite hunting dog. Sentimental value. Bring it to me within the hour, displayed on that screen. He pointed to a large wall-mounted display currently showing a serene seascape. Do this, and we discuss the Founders Gala seriously. It was a gauntlet thrown. Lex knew the network wouldn't be a hobby project. It would be a fortress, likely designed to test his methodology as much as his skill. Failure meant instant dismissal, possibly worse. Success meant proving his value to a man he despised, potentially revealing his true capabilities. Morgan gave him an almost imperceptible nod. Do it, Lex stood, projecting bored confidence. An hour is generous. I'll need a terminal. Nikolai gestured to a sleek workstation tucked discreetly into an alcove. Use that. Isolated connection. Firewalled to hell and back. His smile was a challenge. Lex settled into the chair, the leather cool beneath him. The terminal booted up, presenting a login screen. Standard corporate interface, but Lex knew it was a facade. He plugged in a custom encrypted drive Morgan had provided, loaded with Sasha's tools, a blend of bleeding-edge Minerva tech and Lex's own subtle modifications. He began, fingers dancing over the keys, his focus absolute. He wasn't just hacking, he was performing, crafting a narrative of skill for Nikolai to witness. He probed the outer defenses, sophisticated, layered, corporate-grade firewalls, intrusion detection systems humming with activity. Lex avoided brute force, instead employing a technique mimicking zero-day exploits, finding minute inconsistencies in protocol handling. Slipping through like smoke, he created ghost processes, decoy attacks that drew the security AI's attention while he mapped hidden pathways. Nikolai watched the main display, which now showed a dynamic visualization of network traffic, his expression unreadable. Morgan stood nearby, radiating icy assurance, a silent pillar of support for her partner. Inside, Lex wrestled with the ghosts. The feel of the keyboard, the hunt through code, it was achingly familiar, yet tainted. This was the skill that had made him Prometheus, the skill that had been twisted to destroy him. Every line of code he bypassed felt like a step deeper into the abyss he'd fled. He found the inner vault, biometric locks, military-grade encryption. Time ticked away, 20 minutes gone. Lex employed a multi-vector attack, exploiting a vulnerability in the network's time synchronization protocol, creating a cascading failure in the encryption key generation. It was risky, flashy, exactly the kind of elegant solution Sasha would favor. The encryption dissolved like sand. He navigated the file structure, not a simple photograph folder. Buried deep within financial records and encrypted comms logs. Lex ignored the tantalizing secrets, focused only on the task. He found it. Volkov, hunting, dog, Zarza, JPG. He copied it, routed it through a series of anonymizing relays back to the isolated terminal, and triggered the display. The serene seascape vanished, replaced by a slightly faded photograph of a fierce-looking Borzoi standing proudly beside a much younger Nikolai. Lex stood up, turning to face his uncle. Zarza, he stated flatly. A fine animal. Nikolai stared at the screen, then at Lex. For a long moment, silence reigned, thick and heavy. Then, a slow, genuine smile spread across his face, reaching his eyes this time. It held no warmth, only a chilling appreciation. Impressive, Sasha. Very impressive indeed. Elegant, as promised. He picked up a small, ornate box from a side table and opened it, extracting two sleek black access fobs embedded with a faintly glowing, ghostly emblem, the Founders Gala. Tomorrow night. Black tie, naturally. Consider this your audition passed. He tossed one fob to Lex, the other to Morgan. Mila, a word while Sasha freshens up? The logistics. Lex pocketed the fob, the cold metal a brand against his leg. He nodded curtly and walked towards the guest wing Nikolai had indicated, feeling Nikolai's gaze and Morgan's calculated indifference follow him. He'd won the first round. He'd played Sasha perfectly, but the taste of victory was ash. He'd just proven his usefulness to the enemy. And the ghosts in the code whispered that this was only the beginning.
The Monaco villa hosting the Founders Gala made Nikolai's fortress seem quaint. Nestled on a private peninsula, it was a shimmering beast of glass and light, guarded by men whose tailored suits couldn't hide the bulges of concealed weapons or the cold, scanning eyes. The air vibrated with low bass from inside, and the constant whisper of surveillance drones disguised as moths in the manicured gardens. Stepping from the limousine, as Sasha and Mila Ivanov, was like entering a pressure cooker of obscene wealth and profound danger. The entrance hall was a cathedral of decadence. Crystal chandeliers the size of cars, walls inlaid with iridescent mother-of-pearl, a floor of polished black onyx reflecting the glittering throng. The guests were a rogues gallery of the global shadow elite, arms dealers draped in diamonds conversing softly with cyber-terrorists in bespoke suits, a corrupt African warlord laughing with a sleek financier known for laundering cartel money, a reclusive tech mogul whose algorithms manipulated elections, sipping champagne beside a former KGB operative turned private security consultant. The air itself felt heavy, a cloying mix of expensive perfume, cigar smoke, and the sharp tang of paranoia. Every smile was too wide, every laugh too loud, every glance held a hidden assessment. Trust was a currency no one here possessed. Morgan's hand rested lightly on Lex's arm, a gesture of possession and control. Her Mila persona was in full force. A vision in a backless gown of liquid silver that seemed to absorb the light. Her hair a severe, sleek knot, diamonds glittering coldly at her ears and throat. Her expression was one of bored superiority, scanning the room with the detached interest of a predator surveying a herd. Sylvan Krell, 11 o'clock, the vulture in Armani, Morgan murmured, her lips barely moving as she accepted a flute of champagne from a passing waiter. Lex followed her subtle gaze. Krell was tall, gaunt, with prematurely silver hair swept back from a sharp face. His eyes, magnified by thin-rimmed glasses, darted constantly, missing nothing. He was holding court near a massive ice sculpture, surrounded by sycophants, but his attention kept flicking towards Nikolai, who held sway near the center of the room, and now, towards the newly arrived Ivanovs. He covets the key, Lex muttered back, adopting Sasha's low growl. He sees competition. Let him, Morgan replied, a glacial smile touching her lips as she raised her glass slightly in Nikolai's direction. Their uncle acknowledged them with a subtle nod, his expression unreadable. Play the game, Sasha. Schmoozing is part of the cover. Just remember the walls have ears and eyes. The next hours were a masterclass in high-stakes performance art. They circulated, Mila deploying her lethal charm, a cutting remark disguised as wit, a veiled threat wrapped in flattery, effortlessly navigating the treacherous social currents. Lex, as Sasha, played the brooding tech genius, speaking only when necessary, his contributions laced with jargon about quantum-resistant encryption backdoors and AI-driven dark data correlation that impressed the technically inclined and intimidated the rest. He endured handshakes from men whose digital fingerprints were on atrocities, forced smiles at women who traded in human misery. The proximity to Morgan, the constant pressure of her hand on his arm, the scent of her perfume cutting through the cloying air. It was torture and fuel. Old embers glowed dangerously beneath the ice of their act. During a lull near a bank of servers disguised as abstract art, a man with the pallid complexion of a lifelong basement dweller sidled up to Lex. Heard you bypassed Volkov's pet project, he hissed, his breath smelling of stale energy drinks. Used a temporal desync on the KDF, yeah? Nasty bit of work. It was a test, phrased in the obscure dialect of elite hackers. Lex met the man's eager gaze with Sasha's cool disdain. Predictable architecture, relied too heavily on hardware entropy, left a window. He delivered a concise, technically devastating critique of the network's flaw, laced with contempt. The man's eyes widened slightly, then gleamed with respect. He melted back into the crowd. Morgan gave Lex's arm an almost imperceptible squeeze. Approval. Later, Nikolai beckoned them towards a secluded alcove where a high-stakes poker game was underway. The stakes weren't just money, they were secrets. Folded slips of paper lay beside chips, containing data dumps, access codes, compromising locations. Nikolai dealt. Krell was there, his gaze predatory. Lex and Morgan were invited to join. The game was intense, a silent battlefield. Lex played cautiously, focusing less on winning chips and more on observing the flow of information, the subtle tells of the players. Nikolai was a rock, unreadable. Krell was aggressive, reckless with secrets, hungry for leverage. Morgan played Mila's calculated game, folding strong hands to avoid attention, winning small pots with icy precision. During a tense hand where Krell pushed a significant pile of chips and a data slip marked Oligarch X offshore holdings into the center, Lex noticed something. Nikolai had excused himself momentarily, leaving his encrypted tablet unlocked on the side table. The screen showed a complex network schematic, a fragment of the Ghost Network's internal architecture visible only because Nikolai was reviewing a security alert. Lex's breath hitched. His eyes, trained over a lifetime to recognize patterns, locked onto a specific cluster of nodes, the way they communicated, the failover protocols. It was a design philosophy, an elegance he'd once theorized but never published. A method for creating self-contained, self-destructing network segments resistant to external tampering. His method, stolen from his private research servers years ago. The blood drained from his face. It wasn't just that he'd been framed for Pandora. They hadn't just stolen his reputation. They'd stolen his mind. They'd built the Ghost Network on the bones of his genius. The architect wasn't just a thief. They were a profiler, someone who understood his thought processes intimately. Paranoia, cold and absolute, washed over him. Who knew him that well? His eyes flickered involuntarily to Morgan, coolly assessing her hand. Could she... Nikolai returned, snapping the tablet shut. Lex forced his expression back to bored indifference, but the revelation echoed in his skull, a deafening alarm bell. The gala wasn't just dangerous. It was a hall of mirrors built by someone who knew his deepest secrets. The game had just become infinitely more personal and infinitely more deadly. Every face in the opulent room now seemed like a potential architect of his nightmare. The Ghost Network wasn't just a target. It was his own monstrous reflection. The opulent gala dissolved into a nauseating blur. The glittering facade now, a grotesque mockery. Hours earlier, the sharp, final crack of Morgan's pistol had echoed across the terrace, silencing the whistleblower's choked gasp. The memory replayed in brutal slow motion behind Lex's eyes. The man's cheap shirt blooming crimson, the shock on his ordinary face, the terrible finality as he slumped. Lex kept his face a mask of Sasha's cold composure. But inside, the foundations had crumbled. The Ghost Network wasn't just a target. It was his own nightmare made manifest, built on stolen genius. And Morgan? Morgan had pulled the trigger. Nikolai, ever the observant predator, noted Lex's pallor beneath the carefully applied makeup. The realities of our world can be jarring, Sasha, he murmured, appearing at Lex's elbow, as Morgan was momentarily drawn into a conversation with a sleek Eastern European oligarch. His voice was smooth, but his eyes were chips of ice. Especially for those accustomed to the cleaner violence of ones and zeros. Mila acted decisively. It saved your lives. Remember that. He clapped Lex on the shoulder, a gesture that felt like a death sentence. The network appreciates loyalty. Proven loyalty. He drifted away, leaving Lex adrift in a sea of monsters. Lex found Morgan near a towering ice sculpture slowly melting into obscene shapes. The smell of expensive perfume couldn't mask the phantom scent of cordite and blood. Her Mila facade was flawless. Cool, collected, discussing data extraction methodologies with the oligarch. Only the faintest tightening around her eyes betrayed the agent beneath the ice. When the oligarch moved on, Lex stepped close. His voice a low, dangerous rasp meant only for her. Proven loyalty. He echoed Nikolai's words, the bitterness threatening to crack his control. Is that what you call it? Murdering an innocent man? Morgan didn't flinch. She met his gaze, her own stormy gray eyes holding a terrifying emptiness. His life was forfeit the moment Krell leaked his location, she stated, her voice devoid of inflection, adopting Mila's clipped tone even in private. The network AI had already flagged him. If we hadn't done it, their enforcers would have, and they would have traced the leak back to us. It was containment. Survival. She took a sip of champagne, the movement steady. Sentiment gets you killed here, Sasha. Remember who we are supposed to be. The cold pragmatism was a blade, twisting in Lex's gut. This wasn't the Morgan he'd known, the one who'd railed against collateral damage, who'd believed in shades of gray. This was Minerva's creature, forged in the fires of betrayal and necessity. Had she always been capable of this? Or had the Ghost Network, this masquerade, finally consumed her? The image of the whistleblower's shocked face, the spreading crimson on his cheap shirt, superimposed itself over her icy beauty. Survival? Lex spat the word. At what cost? Our souls? Or is that just another currency you trade in now? He leaned closer, his breath stirring the hair at her temple. And what about my work, Morgan? The network's core, it's built on my blueprints, my unpublished protocols. Stolen. Who inside your precious agency knew me well enough to do that? Who framed me and built this monstrosity? A flicker, minuscule, but there. A fracture in the ice. Surprise? Or guilt? Her gaze darted away for a fraction of a second before snapping back, colder than ever. Impossible, Mila's voice stated flatly. The network's architecture is unique. Alien. Bullshit, Lex hissed. I saw it on Nikolai's tablet. The failover cascade, the self-destruct protocols. It's the Prometheus Gambit. My design. Someone didn't just steal my name. They stole my mind. The paranoia, sharpened by the assassination, flared white, hot. Was it you? Did you hand it over when you handed me over? This time, the reaction was visceral. Her hand tightened on the champagne flute, knuckles white. The mask of Mila slipped, revealing a flash of Morgan's raw fury and pain. You think I'd do that? You think I'd build this? Her voice dropped, trembling slightly despite her efforts. I sacrificed you to save assets, Lex, not to empower monsters. Whoever did this, they played us both. She looked away, her composure visibly cracking under the double assault of his accusation and her own actions. God, Lex, that man. Before Lex could respond, the ambient lighting in the vast room shifted subtly. The music paused. A hush fell, thick with anticipation and dread. On every screen, the massive wall displays, the discrete panels embedded in tables, even the mirrored surfaces behind the bar, a symbol flickered into existence, a stylized, ghostly helix pulsing with faint light. The emblem of the auctioneer. A synthesized voice. Genderless, smooth as oiled silk, yet devoid of warmth. Filled the silence, emanating from hidden speakers. It was the voice of the Ghost Network's AI moderator, the unseen hand that governed this digital hell. Esteemed patrons. The voice resonated, impossibly intimate and utterly alien. Tonight's demonstration of loyalty was illuminating. Sasha and Mila Ivanov, your commitment to the network's integrity is noted. Your value appreciates. Lex felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. The AI had witnessed everything. It knew. However, the auctioneer continued, the tone shifting infinitesimally colder. Vigilance is eternal. Trust, even proven trust, must be tempered by awareness. Remember, no fortress is impregnable. No alliance is unbreakable. Even family, the voice paused, the ghostly helix pulsing faster, can be a vulnerability. The words hung in the air, a cryptic, chilling pronouncement. Then, the screens flickered back to their previous displays. The music swelled again, conversations resumed, but the atmosphere was irrevocably charged. The auctioneer's warning echoed in the sudden, brittle laughter, the furtive glances. Lex's blood ran cold. Family. Nikolai. The warning wasn't abstract. It was specific, targeted. His uncle was in danger. Right now. Nikolai. Lex breathed, his eyes scanning the crowd frantically. He spotted his uncle near the bar, laughing with a group, seemingly oblivious. But Lex saw the subtle shift in the security detail flanking him. A fractional tightening, a hand drifting closer to a concealed weapon. The network's unseen enforcers were moving. We need to warn him, Lex hissed at Morgan, grabbing her arm. The physical contact was electric, charged with shared terror and the awful chasm between them. Morgan's eyes were wide. The agent fully surfaced, calculating angles, exits, threats. Warn him? Lex, if the auctioneer has flagged him as a vulnerability because of us, he's still my blood, Lex argued, the raw Lex Volkov momentarily overwhelming Sasha Ivanov. And he's our ticket to the Arctic auction. We need him alive. Before Morgan could respond, chaos erupted. Not from Nikolai, but from across the room. Sylvan, his face a mask of fury, slammed his fist onto a table, sending glasses shattering. He was yelling, pointing accusingly at a cowering tech lieutenant. Incompetent fools! The verification protocols for the key fragment are flawed. How can I bid if I can't authenticate the goddamn product? The distraction was immediate. Heads swiveled towards the commotion. Security personnel moved to contain the brewing altercation. In that split second of diverted attention, Lex saw it. Near a service entrance, partially concealed by a potted olive tree, a figure in the uniform of catering staff moved with unnatural purpose, not towards the kitchens, but weaving through the crowd towards Nikolai. The figure's hand was hidden in a large, insulated serving tray. There, Lex pointed, shoving Morgan towards Nikolai. Go! Morgan didn't hesitate. She moved with lethal grace. Mila's icy persona discarded for the fluid, deadly efficiency of a Minerva field agent. She intercepted the disguised assassin just as he was raising the tray, revealing not canapes, but a compact, snub-nosed pistol with a grotesquely large suppressor. Morgan's hand shot out, a blur of motion. A vicious chop to the wrist sent the weapon clattering to the onyx floor. A sharp elbow strike to the throat silenced the assassin's gasp before it began. He crumpled, Morgan catching him with apparent concern, a helpful guest steadying a fainting waiter, expertly shielding the takedown from most views. She lowered him behind the large potted plant, her movements swift and clinical. Lex reached Nikolai's side. His uncle had turned, alerted by the commotion with Krell, his expression annoyed but not yet alarmed. What is this? Nikolai began. Move. Now! Lex barked, abandoning Sasha's coolness for raw urgency. He grabbed Nikolai's arm, pulling him forcefully away from the bar, towards a less crowded alcove Morgan had identified earlier as a potential fallback point. Nikolai's security detail, momentarily confused by the dual distractions, scrambled to follow. They reached the relative cover of the alcove, shielded by a heavy velvet curtain and a display case of ancient Greek coins. Nikolai wrenched his arm free, his face flushed with anger and sudden fear. What is the meaning of this, Sasha? You were the target, Lex panted, scanning the crowd. Morgan joined them, her expression grim, wiping a trace of blood from her knuckles with a cocktail napkin. The auctioneer's warning. Family can be a vulnerability. They tried to eliminate you. Nikolai stared from Lex to Morgan, his sharp mind processing the near miss, the cryptic message. Morgan's suddenly lethal competence. His gaze hardened, suspicion warring with dawning comprehension. Because of you, he stated, his voice dangerously low. My association with you, the Ivanovs, made me a liability. He looked at Morgan with new eyes. And you? You are far more than a data broker's wife, Mila. There was no time for denials or explanations. Krell's manufactured crisis was subsiding, security was restoring order, and the downed assassin wouldn't remain hidden for long. We need to leave, Morgan stated, her voice back to Mila's controlled tone, but laced with steel. Immediately, The gala is compromised for you, Nikolai. The network has made its assessment. Nikolai's jaw worked. He looked at the crowd, at the oblivious elite, at the spot where the assassin had fallen. Fear warred with fury in his eyes, but the survival instinct of a lifetime in the shadows won. He gave a curt nod. My private exit. Follow me. Quietly. He didn't thank them. Suspicion still radiated from him, but the immediate threat had forged a temporary, uneasy alliance. He led them through a concealed door, disguised as part of the wood-paneled wall, into a dimly lit service corridor. The sounds of the gala faded, replaced by the hum of industrial air conditioning. Nikolai moved swiftly, his security detail flanking them now, weapons drawn, faces grim. The corridor led to a private garage where a heavily armored Mercedes SUV waited, engine already running. As they piled in, Nikolai turned to Lex in the darkened back seat. The SUV pulled away smoothly, leaving the glittering death trap behind. The Arctic auction, Nikolai stated, not a question. You still need my access. My physical presence is mandatory for final bidding. He studied Lex's face in the intermittent light of passing street lamps. Why save me, Sasha? Sentiment? Or is my value to your mission still paramount? Lex met his uncle's gaze. The ghosts of the past, his father's disownment, his own years in exile, warred with the horrifying present and the desperate need for the Genesis key and the evidence it held. He channeled Sasha's cold pragmatism, burying Lex Volkov's conflicted emotions. Sentiment is a luxury we can't afford, Nikolai, Lex replied, his voice flat. You are our access. The Ghost Network needs to burn. We need to be there to light the match. Consider it mutual survival. Nikolai held his gaze for a long moment, then gave a slow, humorless smile. Mutual survival. How familial. He leaned back, his face etched with new lines of tension. Very well. We proceed to the Arctic. But understand this, Sasha Mila. The auctioneer has marked us all now. The game has changed. Trust no one. Not even each other. His eyes flickered to Morgan, the unspoken accusation hanging heavy in the air-conditioned chill of the SUV. The icy landscape outside Monaco mirrored the frozen wasteland growing between them as the armored vehicle sped towards the airport and the final, deadly act. The private jet touched down not on a runway, but on a vast, frozen plain under an oppressive twilight sky. The Arctic air, even filtered through the cabin, was a physical blow. Dry, razor-sharp, scouring the lungs. Below, a monolithic structure rose from the ice like a fallen obsidian star. The Borealis Data Solutions Facility. Its official purpose was climate research. Its true function pulsed beneath the permafrost. The beating, frigid heart of the Ghost Network. Lex stared out the window, the stolen blueprints and Morgan's gunshot replaying in a relentless loop. Nikolai sat opposite, sipping vodka, his face a mask of grim determination. The auctioneer's warning hung between them like frozen breath. Morgan, beside Lex, was preternaturally still, radiating the focused calm of a predator entering the kill zone. The fragile truce forged in Monaco felt thinner than the ice beneath them. Disembarking was an assault. The cold wasn't just absence of heat. It was a sentient force clawing at exposed skin. Wind howled across the featureless white expanse, carrying stinging ice crystals. Heavily armed guards in advanced thermal gear and opaque visors flanked them, their breath pluming like dragon smoke, guiding them towards a featureless entrance set into the facility's base. No fanfare, only the sterile hum of powerful generators and the crunch of boots on compacted snow. Inside, the contrast was jarring. Harsh fluorescent lights illuminated corridors of gleaming steel and polished concrete. The air was sterile, filtered, unnervingly silent, except for the deep thrum of unseen servers and the whine of powerful cooling systems. It felt less like a building, and more like the interior of a vast, malevolent machine. More visored guards stood at intervals, their expressions unreadable, weapons held at ready. The paranoia here was a tangible presence, thicker than the Monaco galas. They were escorted to a vast, circular chamber deep within the complex, the final auction hub. Dominating the center was a cylindrical column of pure, dark glass, the server core housing the Genesis key and the network's central AI. Around it, tiered viewing levels held discrete booths, each occupied by shadowy figures, the final bidders. Sylvan Krell was already in one, pacing like a caged wolf, flanked by grim-faced technicians. Others were mere silhouettes against the chamber's dim ambient light. High above, massive screens displayed the Ghost Network's Helix emblem and complex shifting data streams. Nikolai's booth offered a commanding view. Lex immediately accessed a discrete terminal integrated into the booth's console, his fingers flying. He wasn't just observing, he was initiating his endgame. Slipping through the network's outer layers via the backdoor he'd discovered. His backdoor? Built into his own stolen designs. He began weaving his digital sabotage, a subtle, cascading failure sequence designed to detonate the entire network core once triggered. It felt like performing surgery on his own monstrous child. The evidence packet Morgan promised, his exoneration, was a ghostly signature deep within the core's labyrinthine code. So close. The auctioneer's synthesized voice, colder and more resonant here in its physical home, filled the chamber, bypassing speakers, seeming to emanate from the very walls. Final bidding authorization commenced. The screens flared. Complex authentication protocols scrolled. The Genesis key materialized visually, not a physical object, but a mesmerizing, fractal lattice of light within the dark glass core, pulsing with contained, terrifying potential. Lot 1, Genesis key, Global Financial Override Protocol. Opening bid, 500 million USD equivalent, cryptocurrency mix Zeta. The bids flashed onto the main screen, anonymized by user handles but escalating with dizzying speed. Krell's booth was a hive of frantic activity, his technicians working furiously. Nikolai watched, his expression calculating, inputting bids with measured precision through his own encrypted device. Lex kept half his focus on the bidding war, half on his silent infiltration, his code worms burrowing deeper, setting digital tripwires. Morgan stood sentinel, her eyes constantly scanning the chamber, the guards, the other booths. The tension was a live wire. Millions became billions in seconds. The fractal lattice pulsed brighter, casting eerie, shifting patterns on the faces below. Krell slammed a fist on his console, his amplified voice cutting through the synthesized announcements. This is absurd. How do we verify the key's full functionality before committing? Your demonstration protocols are insufficient. A ripple of unease went through the bidders. The auctioneer remained silent for a beat, then responded, its tone chillingly patient. Verification level Gamma was provided pre-auction to credentialed bidders. The Genesis key's capacity is absolute. Bid or forfeit. Krell's face contorted with fury and suspicion. Absolute or absolute nonsense. I demand a live, limited scope test. Target the Icelandic kroner. A microburst. Prove it. Before the auctioneer could respond, chaos erupted. Not from Krell's demand, but from Nikolai's booth. The oligarch had risen, a triumphant, predatory grin spreading across his face as he studied a secondary readout on his private screen, seemingly fed by a source outside the auctioneer's control. Test? Why test a decoy, Krell? Nikolai's voice, amplified, boomed through the chamber, dripping with contempt. All eyes snapped to him. Lex froze, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. What? Nikolai pointed a dramatic finger at the pulsing core. The Genesis key isn't a weapon of mass destruction. It's a scalpel. Its true function isn't crashing systems, but manipulating them. Micro-adjustments across trillions of transactions? Controlling markets, not destroying them. And that, he sneered at Krell, is power worth infinitely more than your crude fantasies of chaos. He turned his gaze upwards, towards the unseen AI. Isn't that right, auctioneer? Or should I say, Gregor? The name hung in the sterile air like a bomb. Lex saw Morgan stiffen beside him, her face draining of color. Gregor? A harsh, grating laugh, utterly human and shockingly out of place, echoed through the chamber speakers, overriding the auctioneer's smooth tone. The massive screens flickered. The helix emblem dissolved, replaced by the face of a man Lex recognized from Morgan's past briefings. General Marcus Stavros, codenamed Gregor, Morgan's former mentor at Minerva, officially killed in a training accident years ago. His face was older, harder, scarred, but the fierce intelligence and chilling charisma were unmistakable. Always were too clever for your own good, Nikolai. Stavros's voice rasped, raw and powerful. The auctioneer's persona was gone, replaced by the man pulling the strings. But cleverness without leverage is just noise. He appeared on screen, seated in a command center elsewhere in the facility. You're correct. The Genesis key is a tool for controlled dominion, a means to reshape the global economy silently, irrevocably, from the shadows. And its first target, his smile was a predator's baring of teeth, is the liquidation of certain troublesome oligarchs and the consolidation of their assets under new management. Starting with yours, Nikolai. Stavros tapped a command. On the main screen, beside Nikolai's stunned face, financial graphs representing his vast empire began to plummet catastrophically. The key is already live, Nikolai. A beta test, if you will. Consider your bid. Voided. Nikolai roared. Pure rage and terror, lunging towards the glass separating his booth from the core chamber. Stavros, you traitorous snake! Security Protocol Sigma. Neutralize vulnerability. Stavros' voice was cold command. Before Nikolai could take another step, panels in the ceiling above him hissed open. Not human guards, but sleek, multi-limbed security drones, matte black and silent as death, dropped down on thin cables. They moved with terrifying speed and precision. Nikolai's security detail raised weapons, but pulses of focused microwave energy fried their electronics and seared their flesh before a shot could be fired. Nikolai turned, his eyes wide with primal fear, meeting Lex's for a fraction of a second. A look of horrified realization, perhaps even a flicker of remorse, before the drones converged. There was no dramatic gunshot, only a sickening crunch of metal and bone, a brief, choked-off cry, and then silence. Nikolai Volkov collapsed, a broken doll, onto the cold steel floor of his booth. The auctioneer's warning fulfilled. Even family can be a vulnerability. The chamber was frozen, thick with shock and terror. Krell looked apoplectic. Lex felt sick. Morgan stood rigid, her face a mask of purest fury and betrayal. Gregor, she breathed, the name a curse. You stole Lex's work. You framed him. You built this. Stavros' image sneered. Prometheus's fire was too valuable to leave in the hands of an idealistic fool, Morgan. And Minerva? Bureaucratic, timid. The Ghost Network is power unbound. Lex's genius. My vision. And you, his gaze locked onto Morgan. My protege, you delivered him right back to me. Perfect. The revelation crashed over Lex. The architect, the thief, the puppet master. All along, it was him. Stavros hadn't just used Lex's work. He'd orchestrated Lex's fall to cover the theft. The paranoia, the sense of being intimately known and hunted, it all made horrific sense. Rage, white-hot and blinding, consumed Lex's fear. He turned towards the core terminal in their booth, his fingers finding the keys. He had to trigger the meltdown. Now? Lex, no! Morgan grabbed his arm, her voice desperate. The evidence! Your proof! It's in the core! If you destroy it now, it's a trap, Morgan, Lex yelled, wrenching his arm free, his eyes fixed on the fractal lattice pulsing with stolen power. He wants us to go for it! It's bait! The key is already active. Nikolai's dead. Stavros wins unless we burn it all. He pointed at the screen showing the collapsing financial markets. Stavros' demonstration was escalating. Stavros chuckled. He learns fast, Morgan. Pity it's too late. Security! Terminate Booth 7. The drones that killed Nikolai detached their cables, turning their faceless sensors towards Lex and Morgan's booth. Morgan didn't hesitate. She shoved Lex hard towards the core terminal. Do it! She screamed, pure field agent command. Simultaneously, she drew 2 compact pistols from hidden holsters beneath her Arctic parka. Weapons smuggled past the detectors through Minerva's deepest secrets. She opened fire, not at the drones, their armor too strong, but at the high-intensity lighting arrays above their booth and the security cameras. Glass exploded, plunging their immediate area into near darkness filled with sparks and shrapnel. Burn it, Lex! Burn it all! Seeing her stand, guns blazing, creating chaos to cover him. The sacrifice, the loyalty in that act despite everything, shattered Lex's last doubt. He didn't just believe her, he felt it. With a roar that tore from the depths of his being, Lex slammed his palm onto the console's final trigger sequence. Core meltdown initiated. Cascading failure imminent. T. 90 seconds. A klaxon, deafening and primal, wailed through the chamber. The entire facility shuddered. The fractal lattice within the core flared blindingly white, then began to fracture, dark veins spiderwebbing through the light. The main screens dissolved into static, then flashed the meltdown warning in blood-red glyphs. Chaos erupted. The other bidders panicked, scrambling for exits that wouldn't open. Stavros had sealed the chamber. Krell bellowed orders, his technicians frantically trying to override local systems. The security drones, momentarily disoriented by the darkness and gunfire, reoriented their weapons humming as they targeted Morgan's position. Lex didn't look. His world was the terminal. He overrode safety protocols, channeling the cascading failure directly into the auctioneer's command feed, Stavros' control center. The screens flickered, showing Stavros' furious face for a split second before his image dissolved into digital snow. Lex jammed the signal, creating a critical distraction. Morgan! Go! Lex yelled, abandoning the terminal. He grabbed her arm as she ducked back from a searing microwave pulse that scorched the wall where her head had been. They stumbled out of the booth into the pandemonium of the main chamber. The floor vibrated violently. Steam and sparks erupted from panels. Emergency lights strobed, casting hellish shadows. Morgan pointed, coughing from acrid smoke. "Service conduit! Left wall!" It was a narrow access hatch she'd noted on the facility schematics. They sprinted, dodging falling debris and panicked figures. A drone pivoted, firing. Lex tackled Morgan behind a collapsing server rack as the energy pulse vaporized the spot they'd occupied. The heat was intense. They scrambled towards the hatch. Morgan shot the lockout, yanked it open. Icy winds screamed through the tunnel beyond, an emergency vent leading out. Lex shoved her in first. He glanced back. Krell was trying to smash a console with a fire extinguisher, screaming about his fortune. A drone targeted him. Lex didn't wait to see the outcome. He plunged into the conduit after Morgan, pulling the heavy hatch shut behind them just as another pulse slammed into it, buckling the metal. The tunnel was a freezing, pitch-black hell. They crawled on hands and knees over icy metal grates, the klaxon and the deep groaning shudder of the dying facility surrounding them. The countdown was a physical pressure in Lex's skull. T, 45, 44, 43. They burst out into the blinding white fury of the Arctic storm. The wind immediately tried to tear them off their feet, driving ice needles into their faces. The facility loomed behind them, lights flickering wildly, smoke pouring from vents. They stumbled away, driven by pure adrenaline, the deep snow dragging at their boots. They hadn't made it 50 meters when the world turned white and silent. Not the white of snow, the white of pure energy. A soundless searing flash erupted from the heart of the Borealis facility, vaporizing the central structure instantly. Then the sound hit, a thunderclap so immense it felt like the sky shattering. A visible shockwave ripped outwards, tearing through the remaining buildings, hurling debris like matchsticks. The ground heaved. Lex and Morgan were thrown forward, buried in a wave of snow and displaced ice as the fireball rose. A miniature sun consuming the Ghost Network. The Genesis key, Stavros, Krell, Nikolai's body, and Lex's last hope of exoneration in a single, annihilating conflagration. Silence returned, deeper than before, broken only by the moaning wind and the crackle of distant fires. Lex pushed himself up, spitting snow, his ears ringing. Morgan lay a few feet away, struggling to her knees, her parka torn, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead, illuminated by the hellish glow of the burning ruin. They were alive. The Ghost Network was ash. Stavros was gone, but the cost. Lex looked back at the Inferno, the place where his stolen future had burned. The evidence was gone. He was still Prometheus the traitor, forever. Morgan staggered to her feet, her eyes meeting his across the frozen wasteland. Relief, exhaustion, horror, and a shared devastating grief passed between them. They had survived the Inferno, but the ghosts they carried now were heavier than ever. The wind howled, the sound of a world saved, but at a price neither knew how to pay. The icy darkness stretched endlessly before them, a mirror to the uncertain future. The silence after the blast was absolute, deeper than the Arctic cold. Not true silence. The wind still howled its mournful dirge, and the ruined Borealis facility crackled and groaned like a dying beast, spewing black smoke against the bruised twilight sky. But the world-shattering roar was gone, replaced by a ringing in Lex's ears that felt like the final scream of the Ghost Network itself. He pushed himself up from the snowdrift, every muscle protesting, his thermal gear crusted with ice and grime. The air burned his lungs, tasting of ozone, melted plastic, and something metallic, blood or death. A few meters away, Morgan stirred, coughing violently, spitting red onto the pristine white snow. A gash above her eyebrow bled freely, mixing with the ice on her face. Her eyes, when they met his, were wide with shock, then hardened into the familiar flint of survival. No words were needed. They scrambled towards each other, not for comfort, but for mutual leverage against the treacherous ground. The heat radiating from the shattered complex was a brutal counterpoint to the ambient cold. Debris littered the snowfield, twisted metal, chunks of concrete, and things Lex didn't want to identify. No sign of Krell, Nikolai, Stavros. Only ash and ruin. Move, Morgan rasped, her voice raw. Secondary collapses. Shockwave might have triggered subsurface instability. Drones could have survived the perimeter. She pointed weakly south, away from the Inferno, towards the relative shelter of a pressure ridge jutting from the ice like a frozen wave. Every movement sent jolts of pain through Lex's body, He saw it mirrored in the grimace Morgan tried to suppress. They stumbled, half dragging each other, leaving a ragged trail in the deep snow. The wind stole their breath. The cold gnawed through their gear. The adrenaline that had carried them through the explosion and the desperate crawl through the vent was ebbing, leaving behind bone-deep exhaustion and the crushing weight of what they'd done. What had been lost? They reached the lee side of the pressure ridge, collapsing against the wind-scoured ice. The relative shelter was minimal, but the howl lessened slightly. Lex fumbled in his parka, pulling out a compact emergency beacon Morgan had insisted he carry. He activated it, the tiny green light blinking feebly against the encroaching polar night. Hope was a fragile thing out here. Morgan leaned her head back against the ice, eyes closed, breathing ragged. Blood trickled sluggishly down her temple. Lex watched her, the woman who had been his lover, his betrayer, his savior, his executioner. The woman who had gunned down an innocent man to save their cover, then stood defiantly against a drone army so he could burn his own future to ashes. The conflicting images warred within him, fueled by exhaustion and the lingering phantom of Stavros' sneering face. My protege. You delivered him right back to me. He knew, Lex croaked, his voice alien to his own ears. Stavros. He knew you'd come for me, that I'd come for the evidence. He used us, used you, to draw me out, to finish what he started. Morgan didn't open her eyes. A single tear, instantly freezing, traced a path through the grime and blood on her cheek. Yes, she whispered, the word ripped away by the wind. He played us both, from the beginning. Framing you, isolating me after his death, leaving just enough breadcrumbs about the network, knowing my guilt, knowing my duty, would lead me back to you. She finally opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. The stormy gray was filled with a profound, weary sorrow, and I walked us right into his trap. The raw admission hung between them. It wasn't absolution for the whistleblower's death, but it was a shared understanding of the monstrous manipulation they'd endured. The Ghost Network hadn't just been built on Lex's stolen work. It had been fueled by their shared history, their pain, expertly weaponized by Stavros. The evidence, Lex started, the words catching in his throat. He looked back towards the pyre of the server core. The proof of his innocence, the reason he'd agreed to this suicide mission, was vaporized atoms now, mingled with Stavros' ashes. Gone, Morgan stated flatly. There was no sugarcoating it. Along with the key, the network, Stavros, Nikolai. She paused, a muscle ticking in her jaw. The whistleblower, all gone. The finality of it crashed over Lex. He was free of the immediate threat, but the world still saw Prometheus as a monster. The victory tasted like ashes, colder than the snow beneath him. He had saved the world from financial catastrophe, perhaps, but condemned himself to perpetual exile. The ghost remained a ghost. Hours bled into one another, marked only by the deepening cold and the rhythmic blink of the emergency beacon. Hypothermia began to whisper seductively in Lex's veins. He fought to stay awake, focusing on the pain, the wind, Morgan's shallow breathing beside him. Just as despair threatened to swallow him whole, a new sound cut through the wind, the rhythmic thump-thump-thump of rotor blades. A sleek, unmarked tiltrotor aircraft, painted in matte Arctic camouflage, descended from the swirling gray sky like a mechanical angel of mercy. It landed a cautious distance away, kicking up a blinding blizzard of snow. Armed figures in advanced cold weather gear, bearing no insignia but moving with Minerva precision, disembarked, securing the perimeter before approaching. Morgan stirred, pushing herself up with a wince. Took them long enough, she muttered, though relief washed over her strained features. The extraction was swift and professional. They were bundled onto the aircraft, stripped of their frozen outer layers, wrapped in heated blankets, and given warm, sweet fluids. A medic tended to Morgan's head wound and assessed Lex's bruises and likely cracked ribs. The warmth was agonizing at first, then blissful. Lex sank into the padded seat, the vibrations of the aircraft thrumming through him, the enormity of the past days threatening to pull him under. He slept. Not peacefully, but a deep, exhausted oblivion haunted by the fractal lattice of the key, Nikolai's dying eyes, the crack of Morgan's gun, and Stavros' laugh. He awoke to soft light and quiet. Not the harsh fluorescence of the Arctic base or the vibrating gloom of the aircraft, but the gentle gray light of a northern dawn filtering through the window of a small, sparsely furnished cabin. He was in a narrow bed, swathed in clean bandages, wearing soft thermal underwear. The air smelled of wood smoke and pine. Outside, snow-covered pines stood sentinel against a pale sky. The door opened softly. Morgan stood there, leaning against the frame. She wore simple, clean fatigues, her face pale, but the gash neatly stitched and covered. The icy mask of Mila Ivanov was gone, stripped away by fire and blood. She looked exhausted, vulnerable, and utterly real. The sight sent a jolt through Lex that had nothing to do with pain. "Long year bien," she said quietly, answering his unspoken question. "Svalbard, Minerva Safe House. We've been here 2 days. You needed the rest." Lex pushed himself up gingerly. Every muscle protested, but the sharpest pains had dulled. 2 days? His voice was rough. Morgan nodded, entering the room. She pulled a chair beside the bed. "Debriefings are done. The official story is being spun. Borealis was a catastrophic industrial accident. Stavros remains officially dead. The financial tremors Nikolai felt? Attributed to a coincidental, unrelated market panic." She met his gaze, her expression grave. "The Ghost Network never existed. Officially, the whistleblower. Collateral damage in an unrelated criminal incident." Lex closed his eyes. The erasure was almost as complete as the meltdown. The world would never know how close it came to the edge. And he remained Prometheus the traitor. The ghost was still bound to his shadow. "And us?" he asked, opening his eyes. A flicker of pain crossed Morgan's face. "Minerva is grateful. Deeply. They know the truth. Or at least, the director and a trusted few do. The rogue faction within Minerva that backs Stavros is being quietly rooted out. It's a mess, but contained." She took a deep breath. "They've offered you a deal, Lex. Full pardon, a new identity. Not just clean, but validated. A senior position within Minerva's cyber division. Resources, protection. A chance to use your skills. In the light." She paused, her gaze intense, searching his. "With me." The offer hung in the quiet room. Safety, redemption, a future, a partnership, not just professionally, but personally. He could see the hope warring with the fear of rejection in her eyes. He saw the woman who had haunted his exile, who had shattered him and then fought beside him through hell. The love, scarred and battered, but undeniably real, that had flared amidst the lies and the gunfire. Lex looked down at his hands, the hands that had coated firewalls and triggered meltdowns, that had held Morgan and recoiled from her violence. He thought of the cold anonymity of Reykjavik, the constant fear. He thought of sitting in a Minerva office, wearing a badge, working for the very system that had cast him out, alongside the woman whose choices, however coerced, had led to an innocent man's death. Could he live with that? Could he truly trust the light, knowing the shadows that lurked within it, within her, within himself? The blood on their hands, his from the network's destruction. Collateral damage was inevitable, the director had said. Hers from the whistleblower. Felt like a chasm too wide to bridge with a government job. He looked up at Morgan. He saw the fierce loyalty that had made her pull the trigger to save him, the devastating guilt she carried, the love that had made her scream, "Burn it all!" He saw the ghost of the woman he'd loved, forever changed by fire and ice. "I can't, Morgan," he said, his voice quiet but firm. The hope in her eyes dimmed, replaced by a profound, weary acceptance. She'd known. "The pardon, the identity. I'll take that. I'm tired of running from ghosts I didn't create. But the job? The cage? Even a gilded one? I can't breathe in that light. Not yet. Maybe not ever." He swung his legs out of bed, testing his weight. He walked to the small window, looking out at the stark, beautiful desolation of Svalbard. The ghost network is gone. Stavros is gone. But the world is still full of shadows. People like Krell, fragments of the network, new monsters rising. He turned back to her. "The skills that built it, that burned it, they're still mine. And they don't belong behind a government desk." Morgan stood. She didn't argue. She understood the ghosts he carried, because she carried them too. She walked to him, stopping close. Not touching, but the space between them hummed with the weight of everything unsaid, everything shared, everything lost and found in the fire. "Where will you go?" she asked, her voice thick. "Somewhere quiet, somewhere cold. To heal, to think." He managed a faint, humorless smile. "Maybe do some freelance security consulting. Ethical hacking." The irony's appealing. A ghost of her own smile touched her lips, fleeting and sad. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a sleek, unmarked satellite phone. Not Minerva issue. Something older, more personal. She pressed it into his hand. Prepaid, encrypted. Burner protocols baked in. Number is memorized. She tapped her temple. Only one person has it. Lex closed his fingers around the phone. It felt warm, solid, a lifeline, a promise. I'm not asking you to wait, Morgan said, her gaze unwavering. I'm not promising I won't change, but if the shadows get too deep, if the next ghost rises, she swallowed. Call, wherever you are, whatever you need. Lex looked into her eyes, stormy gray, filled with regret, resolve, and a love that had survived incineration. He saw not the agent, not the Ice Queen, but Morgan Shaw, as scarred and real as he was. He leaned forward, slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. He brushed his lips against hers. A kiss not of passion, but of shared devastation, of impossible gratitude, of a connection too fierce to die. It tasted of salt, blood, and the faint, lingering smoke of the world they'd burned down. He pulled back. Take care of the light, Morgan, he whispered. Someone has to. He turned, picked up a pre-packed duffel bag by the door. Minerva's parting gift, containing his new identity, funds, and clean clothes. He didn't look back. He walked out of the cabin, into the crisp Svalbard morning. The cold air stung his lungs, clean and sharp. Free. Behind him, Morgan stood at the window, watching his figure grow smaller against the vast white landscape until he disappeared into the trees. A single tear escaped, tracing a warm path down her cold cheek. She touched the phone in her own pocket, a mirror to the one she'd given him. Then she squared her shoulders, the agent settling back into place, the ghost of Lex Volkov, a permanent resident in her heart. 3 months later, a nondescript package arrived at a secure Minerva Dropbox. Inside, no note, only a single custom-built data drive. When analyzed, it contained a comprehensive, untraceable exploit for a nascent Darknet platform showing alarming similarities to the Ghost Network's early architecture, along with the coordinates and security schematics of its main server hub. Attached to the exploit code was a single line, embedded like a signature. For when the next ghost rises, Morgan Shaw allowed herself a small, grim smile as she reviewed the data. She picked up her secure line, issuing crisp orders for a precision strike. The ghost was still out there, watching, waiting, and so was she. The dance in the shadows wasn't over. It had just found a new, fragile rhythm. The embers still glowed.
Enjoyed the story? Like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss the next one.